Denise Tuffy, Specialist Contracting Director with the Construction Industry Federation. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about SOsA, the new Smart Offsite Association. Explain, what is SOsA?
The Smart Offsite Association represents the offsite industry in Ireland. So it represents our members that have an offsite manufacturing facility. Now, it does fall within the CIF broad membership base, which can be quite complex to explain, but if we divide it as simply as possible, we have main contracting, specialist contracting and house building. SOsA falls under the Specialist Contracting Department of members and under the Alliance of Specialist Contractors.
In terms of what's being delivered across Ireland, what proportion of that is being delivered through various off-site methodologies?
In terms of what's been built, the 7 types are very broad. So you can say your windows are done off-site, and they've been done off-site for generations at this stage, and your stairs are done off-site. So that's a very difficult metric to actually give you, Carol. I don't have an answer, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's something that we've explored in the past, and we know that, say for example, the government coming in set a mandate that they wanted more MMC, and it's something we hear with every Housing for All revision, another one on the cards in the coming weeks. We know that the productivity of the construction industry has absolutely been under a lens. We've spoken to one of your colleagues, PJ Rudden, chair of Build Digital and the construction sector group driving productivity, about Build Digital's initiatives. So the productivity of the construction industry in Ireland has come under pressure, but have we seen enough of an improvement to tally with maybe the government investment?
Productivity in the Irish construction sector, or any construction sector, is incredibly difficult to really measure. It's not similar to other industries where there are no unknowns, or you can plan for unknowns. In the construction industry, you don't know how long a planning process is going to take, and while there's improvements being made and there's a lot of effort being put in trying to improve these things, it's just not there. It's too uncertain of an environment. The weather can change the way a site operates on a certain day. So it's a very difficult metric to measure. And on top of that, when we look at offsite manufacturing, that isn't actually captured in the construction figures. So offsite manufacturing, while productivity is up in relation to that, construction doesn't reflect that.
That's really interesting. You should say that, because actually in earlier this summer, I was party to a presentation on a skills report, and that also covered the issue of productivity, not just across the construction industry, it was multi-sectoral. And what was really interesting is that there was a stat for construction and a stat for manufacturing. And so I asked the question, where does construction manufacturing sit? And actually that data wasn't being captured. Is that still the reality?
It is, Carol, I'm afraid so. Yeah, it is. So in terms of, I'm going to go back to your original question about what percentage of MMC is being used. If we look at low-rise housing, and if we just look at the first 2 categories, for example, because they're talked about quite a lot, there's been a 20% roughly increase in low-rise housing using timber frame, and that's just timber frame. So most low-rise housing in the country are actually using modern methods of construction. Very much so. It's the predominant source of 2D frames. That's where they're being used predominantly. But we have the mandate under Government for All for 25% of MMC to be used in relation to public housing. Look, that mandate is brilliant, but if you think that 60% of low-rise housing is using timber frame, surely we're over the 25% already. So we do feel it could be stronger, but it's great to have it in there. We asked for it, and it's good it's there.
Yeah, well, okay, well, let's bring it back to your members then. So across the Smart Offsite Association, tell me a little bit about your membership, you know, who's involved.
So we have a range of members as 2D and 3D suppliers at the moment, and we have as well some M&E suppliers. So who's involved? If we go with the 3D volumetric, for example, our president is Vision Built, or Brian Kennedy from Vision Built. They're based in Tubbercurry, and they've been very strongly involved in skills as well as the schools programme. So we'll find a lot of our 3D volumetric suppliers are highly involved in the classroom framework with the Department of Education. So with that, we have, for example, CPAC. They're an award-winning school for Kishog. Procon Modular, it is Procon Modular. They've also had their Goatstown school, which was nominated for awards. Actavo has been heavily involved in schools, as had most of our 3D volumetrics manufacturers, to be
Excellent.
be specific on it.
Is that where modular is sitting comfortably, kind of in the construction space, or sorry, in the education space and the healthcare space? Are we seeing more modular move into residential more?
We have modular not so much into the residential space in Ireland at the moment. Now, under government's overarching policy, which is the roadmap for increased delivery of, or increased use of MMC in public housing delivery, to put it in one mouthful, in that there is a pilot project for 3D in terms of housing, but it hasn't been the predominant market for most of the modular manufacturers at the moment. That has come from the classrooms framework, and it has traditionally. There was 16, I think, companies in it originally. There's a new framework just brought out, or just the pre-qualification period is just stalled and we're going into a tendering phase. But a lot of the companies will be very much competing to get onto that framework. It's the main source of pipeline in the Irish market for 3D manufacturers. We need more pipeline. We need healthcare to start taking on 3D volumetric. Because if we think about it, schools make sense, and so does healthcare. So schools, if they want to get the classrooms in while the kids are at school, a healthcare setting, you don't want a busy site right beside a live hospital for obvious reasons. These are the places where modular really makes sense, and it's of benefit to the taxpayer, but it also grows an indigenous 3D market that we really need to support in the short term. 3D volumetric, it's in a difficult space because it needs economies of scale to really get going. And we see that the UK has supported, arguably more so in terms of pipeline than the Irish government has done. And the Irish government have done a lot of work to promote MMC, and we've seen that with the roadmap. But pipeline, it really needs the pipeline to bring it that step further. If I go, for example, for a pipeline, we have a main contractor, Adston. They can pivot where they're putting their resources because they have a main contractor crafting arm and they have an offsite facility. They've told me if they were just relying on the offsite facility, it'd be very difficult to keep the staff. And because you've got a factory, you need consistent level of throughput, and that's why it's so important to have pipeline.
Will you break that down a bit? Because I think that's one of the things that's not fully understood there. So the need for a solid pipeline, that's something that every business in any sector would understand, and it's something that the traditional construction industry would talk about a lot. But I think when we're looking at MMC and going more into the manufacturing space, actually it's the difference between survival or not survival. It's having the cash flow to sustain that. So will you explain how your members view the pipeline that they need to be able to invest in their facilities and continue to grow?
They need the pipeline. Look, multi-annual funding across the whole industry. Nobody's going to say no. Everyone is very much pushing for it because it lets everybody put the money into R&D and put money into upskilling their staff and really planning for the future. It would be more successful for everybody if that was in place. But with a manufacturing facility, you can't move people from site to site. You can't ramp up and ramp down as easily as you may do with traditional construction. So it's so important that members have that pipeline. If we look at the membership, we did a survey in 2024, at the end of 2024, it was a capacity survey, and we asked the 3D volumetric suppliers, had they considered leaving Ireland? And everybody had considered leaving Ireland. So we know Vision Built are working in the UK, we know Castle Modular are working in the UK, and everybody else, if they haven't, are looking at it in Procon also. So it's a tricky market in Ireland at the moment, and until that pipeline is there, these companies can't thrive. And it's also worth noting that these companies are generally in regional areas. So that gives local employment to regional communities. So if these people are let go, that has a knock-on effect to the whole community. Again, if they get increased employment, it has a positive effect. So
what can SOsA do as the Smart Offsite Alliance, when you bring association, you're bringing the bodies together, what can you do as a body to be able to bring competitors together effectively to grow the pipeline so there's more work for everybody? But that's easier said than done.
It is. And look, we understand that these people are competing, or these companies, but I honestly believe that there's an overall consensus that we're better together. And we set up a technical working group, and it's a very We've been established for a few months, and there's definitely an element of trust building there increasingly over time, as comes with any group of people when you bring them together. But we're all aware that the more we can share, the more we can all grow. And we're looking to the UK market as well, where they're slightly more mature perhaps than the Irish market is. So look, we're trying to bring everybody together, and it's really to get the messaging out to government as well.
What does cooperation on the ground look like? So when you're bringing, again, competitors together, so say, for example, across your working group, you know, what does that look like in practice?
Really, there's the online meetings, okay, they're great, but it's getting people into the room, it's getting them out socially, it's getting that element of trust. That's what's important, and that can only come with time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is, you know, it's an important concept that we talk about collaboration, we talk about the importance of working together, and yet we are bringing together innovators who, by the nature of the work they're doing, have designed new products, services, systems, ways of doing things that they need to protect as well.
100%.
But the reality is, if we take a protectionist attitude and don't work together as a growing sector, then there won't be a pipeline for anybody. And I think we're in quite a sweet spot at the moment where I would take the view, and I, you know, I can be critical of government, but I take the view right now that I think the government has been very open in terms of understanding what's new, what's coming down the track, what organisations can do across construction and manufacturing to drive productivity. I think they're very open to learning. They're very open to being shown what's there. I think maybe we're at quite a historic time of industry innovation here. We're actually, government is saying, show us what you're doing, explain how this works, and see how it can help us deliver more homes on the ground. And if you can do that, we will support you through a whole range of supports, from training right through to delivery and optimising procurement. But do we have a clear enough picture as to what good delivery for offsite looks like?
Do we have a good picture? It's so multifaceted that a clear picture is definitely hard to phrase. But we have our key asks, and that's what will grow the industry. 100% government are opening to learning about MMC, and we've seen that through various initiatives.
And they are investing in it.
They have 100%, as outlined in the roadmap. But we still haven't got the basics. We haven't got pipeline. And we need frameworks like the Department of Education frameworks to really get these companies off the ground. So, for example, we have the skills report that the expert group on future skills needs report produced with EY, and we have the action plan on top of that. But until these companies have pipeline, they can't invest as heavily in the skills as they would like to. So we need that pipeline. We have issues around agreement certification. While it's necessary, it's long and it's difficult to obtain. We have the 60-year guarantee on facades. That's a big issue when it comes to 3D volumetric. And standardisation. The government have done their standardisation study for both education and housing, and it's brilliant. But it's really to disseminate that into the market at the moment.
Where are we with that standardisation project?
And due to be released. I'm not 100% certain of where exactly it is in the process, but there's been great work done there by Hawkins Brown, and the same with the education.
Did your members feed into that?
We did, yes, we did. And Smart Offset, it was actually the first output from our technical working group, was to feed into the standardisation study. And it was brilliant to work with the Department of Housing to have that opportunity. So no, very positive. We've got high hopes for it.
So actually take us through those key asks again. And by the way, in terms of key asks, were these done by way of submission to government? Have you fed in? So as you and I sit down here today, we're just weeks off budget 2026 being announced. You know, do any of your key asks hinge on delivery through budget 2026?
We'd asked for all of these areas through our budget submission in one way or another.
Okay.
There are key asks. We work under different headings, but all of our asks are in there. as well as that, in terms of 2D, for example, I've spoken very heavily about 3D manufacturing, but in 2D, we're looking for standardization there as well. And for housing designs specifically, seeing as it lends itself so well to 2D systems, we are looking for simpler designs. Don't make it overcomplicated. Keep it simple.
And in terms of, say, your members who are coming together to are they aligned on what they need? So obviously 2D and 3D, they're different systems. They will be broadly more applicable for different types of projects. So are your members aligned in what they're looking for?
We have. Now, also in our survey that we did last year, we asked, I'm going back to 3D again, we asked what areas, and healthcare and education came out quite strongly from that perspective. From a 2D perspective, housing is a predominant driver there.
Okay, and in terms of, you mentioned in particular the latest education framework, that's a good model. Is that a model of procurement we should be looking at for offsite and other modern methods of construction?
I 100% think so. Where it lends itself. We're not saying...
What works about that framework?
What works about it is that it's specific for classrooms, and that lends itself to offsite construction because of the speed and the fact that it's delivered offsite, which is very useful in a school setting, in a live school setting, and it can be done during the summer holidays. Again, with healthcare, it's the timing and the less disruption. There are two of the primary benefits there. So these sectors really benefit, I think, from, well, we all think for offsite manufacturing.
You mentioned testing and certification being a barrier, but I'm looking across your membership. You've got members that are dealing with, from timber frame, CLT through to SIP, the structurally insulated panels. So just in terms of certification and testing, how different are the needs across the different typologies?
So if we look at, we have SIP members, so MMC Homes Ireland, we have CLT, that'll be Lidan Designs, we have Cygnum Timber Frame, that are a substantial supplier and they're upping their capacity at the moment. They have different routes to market. So we have the timber frame manufacturers in SAI certification, and we also have Agreement certification for 3D. Very different in terms of the level of detail, because if you're looking at a 3D system, obviously it's much larger in the amount of certification and testing that has to be done, so it's a much more arduous process. But our members are getting through it. To be a member of the Smart Offsite Association, you either have to have got, for your 2D system, you need NSAI Agreement certification, or you need NSAI Agreement certification for your 3D system. Members are really, and they emphasise this fact, and it's across the board, they're so conscious of the need for high standards in this industry, and they're really driving that. It's a key point.
I would put it to you, and I know it's something that's thrown out as a bit of a cliche, but sometimes cliches are cliches for a reason. But we can't allow standards become a barrier. That we want standards that are sufficiently high, but not more so.
I 100% agree.
Where are we right now with that, and are we overcorrecting like we have seen across some of our building regulations? There would be a view that over the past decade and a half we have overcorrected. Are we in danger of overcorrecting in terms of standards for offsite and other MMC?
I think we are, Carol. I think it's a problem with the Irish industry at the moment, and it's been well spoken about. And in the upcoming DigiCon, we're having a panel purely addressing this area with experts in this area. The Irish industry is it's a difficult place in terms of the high standards that it's set itself, and questions definitely have to be asked around, is it necessary in all circumstances? And that's across the board.
Do your members have a view of, and I know your members particularly, and this is probably geared for those in the 3D space who are looking towards residential, but obviously we're just over a closed period, the open consultation for exempted developments that would allow modular homes to be instated without planning permission in the rear gardens of people's homes. So the public consultation period has just closed. We know there was somewhere in the region of 900 submissions, which is incredibly low considering the number of voices we have out there for construction. And in fact, across our own channels, we would have had more than 900 engagements on polls and surveys on this particular topic over the last month. But do your members have a view on this? Because certification and standards didn't really enter the conversation around modular homes that might be exempted developments on an individual basis.
Under the exempted development, the legislation at the moment, or the drafted legislation at the moment, it's to comply with the building regulations, and there is a fear that companies that maybe wouldn't be either in SOsA or CIF, or smaller companies, could have possibly an impact on the industry from a reputation point of view. So there's certainly a fear that cheaper alternatives could be sought in the market rather than what is certified, through argument.
And is that a threat? Would your members see that as a threat?
The members would see it as a threat, considering the vast amount of capital they've put into ensuring that they are reaching the necessary standards and they are producing a product that is of the highest quality. It would be shameful, and yes, there is a fear around it.
Okay, and I'm conscious of our time here today, but just again, we are approaching budget 2026. You've outlined some of the asks there. I think there is broad agreement that the pipeline has to grow, and in fact that's kind of been the narrative of this emerging sector for the last number of years. But if anything, it's shrank in some areas, and so we're seeing innovators in this space not consider Ireland as their primary market. They're already exiting they're not exiting Ireland, but they're building a strategy that's taking their expertise outside of Ireland, to the point where actually the Irish pipeline will need to strengthen a lot for people to be able to invest in the Irish market. What are the short-term steps that the government could take to improve the trading environment really for your members here in Ireland?
We need pipeline, we need multi-annual funding. People need to see what's coming up, and if they don't see what's coming up, and it's not only offsite, it's across the industry, they will export. And this is a shame, considering we're in the middle of a housing crisis and an infrastructure crisis. Capacity is not being utilised here. When we look at offsite alone, we had to the same survey that was taken, with 52% excess capacity at the end of last year in the offsite industry alone. That's a massive amount. That's a factory.
That essentially capacity, is that depending on facilities ramping up for more shifts?
No. Okay, so if we look at the 2D timber frame, they've done an excellent job, and they've been around arguably the longest in the country, and they really are a blueprint for where offsite manufacturing should go. But they aren't operating on shifts. Extra capacity has been built into the system, but nobody's operating on a 2-shift with 2D panelised systems. With 3D, that's 52% excess capacity. That means there's factories working at less than half their capacity, and that's not even taking into account shifts.
Are those factories, take aside for a moment kind of the waste of capacity at a time when we need delivery on the ground, actually are those facilities in danger of not being able to stay operating?
They are 100%, yes. I think I agree that they are, Carol, yes.
So what would you like to see? Obviously we've discussed the asks for budget 2026, but actually even in terms of the target set by government, do they go far enough? Do we need to be looking at more than 25% of social homes being delivered utilising MMC, one of the 7 categories of MMC? Do we need to be looking at upping that standard?
I think 100%. I think we are at 25%, if not beyond it. It's measuring that. That's the issue at the moment. 100%, it should be stronger than 25%.
Well, then let's just very briefly, if we could mention, a lot of what we have been doing in Ireland was adopted from the UK, for better or for worse. Maybe by default, maybe just gone unchallenged, or that there just wasn't the resources to stop and reflect and say, actually, is that appropriate for the Irish market? So we've seen that across our classifications.
Yes, 7 types
of MMC for starters, but also in terms of what might become a very important standard, PMV, pre-manufactured value. So do your members have a view on that? As in, are we approaching that in the right way?
From an Irish setting, Ireland has not set its definition for pre-manufactured value. We know Construct Innovate are looking at this, and it's definitely a project that members of the Smart Offsite Association are very interested in seeing the outcome of. one view that has been put forward is that if we are to look at pre-manufactured value in an Irish setting, then all stakeholders need to be involved. So we're talking about Smart Offsite Association, CIF, are arguably the same, the ACEI, the RIAI, everybody, all the stakeholders needs to come together and figure out how they're going to set this figure, how it's going to be calculated.
Are you seeing an increased trust and reliance build up between industry and academia? You mentioned there Construct Innovate. They've just done phenomenal work through the University of Galway. In fact, it's the most, I think, closest to industry I've seen academia come. And I know TU Dublin have a number of very strong initiatives there as well. But are we starting to see academia and industry work a little closer together?
Absolutely. We have never seen the construction industry work with academia like it does through Construct Innovate. It's been in existence as 2 or 3 years, and what they've achieved in that period of time, I think it's phenomenal and very much supportive of its continued success. 100%. We're hitting a new time for Irish construction. Irish construction industry has been exporting for years and has been ahead of its game. We've seen a phenomenally successful mechanical and electrical industry that's been based on export and high tech and highly innovative exports. So it's great to now have these expertise in the country. And we know that Construct Innovate have had problems around getting researchers, which just really signifies how new it is that academia and industry are working this closely together. So
finally, what's next for SOsA?
Hopefully, well, a growth in our membership. We all recognise that together, the stronger our voice will be, the more members that's in the room. We also want people to argue, or not argue, but to debate the finer aspects of what it's looking for. And the more people that are in the room and the more expertise we can get, definitely the more successful it will be as an association. We'll continue to talk to government through the many vehicles, be it subcommittees, committees, direct meetings, you name it. We'll keep the conversation going, but we'll also work with our technical working group. So try and grow everybody's business insofar as we can.
You continue to speak to government and we'll hope they listen. Denise Tuffy, thank you so much for joining us here today, Specialist Contracting Director within the Construction Industry Federation, and for telling us about SOsA.
Thanks, Carol.